Today's episode is all about sex and age. What changes, what stays, and why so many people quietly worry that desire has an expiry date. From shifting bodies and busy lives to pleasure after 35, to illness, disability, and menopause. This is about letting go of old scripts and learning what actually works right now. I'm joined by Emily Power-Smith, clinical sexologist and sex educator, who's here to help us rethink sex as something that evolves, not something that disappears. And this episode is about curiosity over pressure, adaptation over shame, and remembering that pleasure doesn't belong to just one stage of life. Now, this podcast is mostly about fun indoors, but if you fancy a bit of al fresco, why not get out of the house and take a visit to Kildare Village with over 100 boutiques, 60 of which are exclusive in Ireland and 20 new brands to choose from. Visit Kildare Village, shopping that's so Irish. You are very welcome to the podcast. How are you?
It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. So, we'll start off with this massive question. Do you think society still sees sex as something that belongs to younger people? And by younger, I mean under 35.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's changing slowly, but I think you're onto it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what is represented for us in the media, in movies, in shows. It's beginning to change a little bit. I think Grace and Frankie did a lot of good for us, for older women. But yeah, generally, I think it is still thought of as something that we should kind of be easing off as we get a bit older. And then we have the whole thing of kids being freaked out thinking about their parents being sexual, and that's something that's always been there and is still very much there. So there's an ageism element to it for sure, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, when I think back over movies and romantic movies or whatever, I can think of plenty where the male in the relationship was a lot older.
Like a lot older.
There's loads of them.
Yeah. And really young actresses.
Very few with older women.
Yeah.
Very few. I remember, is it Something's Gotta Give? Anyway, Diane Keating, God rest her soul, we lost her last year. And I remember that being, oh my God, seeing an older woman talk about pleasure and be in a sex scene. I think that was one of the first movies I remember seeing of a woman of that age being in that scenario.
With a man her own age.
Yeah.
Because I think we've had a few more things. I think Nicole Kidman's done one or two. There's been a few things with older women and younger men. And it's still it's not quite the message of normalising what we all get up to or enjoy or miss when we're with partners of our own age. That's still something that's very rare, and it's kind of almost fetishized when you see older women in movies being sexual as opposed to a normal thing. It's rare that we see that.
It is rare. We very rarely see the normality of sex on the screen anyway. I want to talk about letting sex evolve, because we're often told that if sex doesn't look like it did in our 20s, something is wrong. Why is that idea so damaging?
Well, let's just look at why it's there in the first place. I mean, we're given a young male's version of sexual arousal and sexual pleasure. We're not given an older person's, and I mean older as in after 20s, and we're not given a female version. So it's an age thing for sure, but it's also can be a gendered thing, that if a person, a female or an older person, doesn't fit into that model that we're given, they feel broken or somehow not working right, when actually they just don't have anything to compare to that would be useful and realistic.
Well, there's a lot in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is. Okay, well, that brings me on to my next question, because you talk about the goal of not going back.
Correct.
Not going back to the way it was and what it should be, but to learn what works now. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
I'm smiling because I'm trying to imagine me going back to the sex I had in the 20s on my poor old knees. And it's now, there's no way. I must have spent too much time on my knees in my 20s. Praying, obviously.
No, obviously.
But we've got to go with how our bodies are and not feel that we're somehow in deficit because our bodies have changed. We're organic creatures. Of course we change. Our tastes in food and wine and travel and music change with age. We might still love to think back to what we got up to, but that doesn't mean it's going to even work for us now if we were to try the same things that we did in our 20s. And I think a lot of people get stuck there. Just even thinking about muscle mass and blood flow, the type of stimulation a person needs as they get older has to be different to match our blood flow. Just take that one thing alone before we even get into hormones or, aches and pains or illness or long-term medication use or all these things that begin to catch up with us.
And long-term relationships.
Or long-term relationships, yeah.
That can be one to navigate as well.
It really is, though. And if you don't have the ability to talk to each other in a useful way about these things, then when things start to feel different or not work the way they used to or not turn you on in the same way, it can be really hard to know what to do about it.
You have a brilliant tapas versus three-course meal analogy. Can you explain that to our audience?
Well, again, we're given one model for what sex should be. First of all, it's always heteronormative. And so loads of people are left out of the conversation. It's always a binary model, men and women. So another whole load of people are left out of the conversation. And then it is, first course is a little bit of foreplay if you're lucky. A main course is penis and vagina. And then if you're lucky, you might get, a pudding after. It might be a cuddle. And that's not always there either. So that is fine for some people and go for it, absolutely, if you're happy with it. But for most of us, it's going to get to a point where that doesn't serve us. It's penetration, penis and vagina penetration, I like to think of it as one dish on a table of tapas. And if you go to your favourite restaurant and you order your favourite tapa and it's not available, you don't leave hungry, you try something else, right? And you might even learn that you have another favourite. So if we can think of penetrative sex, penis and vagina sex, as just a dish, it might be your favourite, it might have always been your favourite, we can begin to experiment a little bit more and give ourselves permission to try different things. And if we don't have it as the main act, which, and let's face it, it doesn't work for a lot of us as the main act every time.
A huge percentage of us, let's be very clear, because the stats show that something like, I think over 80% of women don't climax from penetrative sex.
Alone. Penetrative sex
alone, exactly.
I mean, they need other stimulation as well, not alone as in masturbating.
Gotcha. But that's a huge thing. So that, and I suppose there's a misconception there, like men, a lot of men, I don't want to go, I'm going to go out on a limb here. A lot of men, that would be the main dish and that would serve a lot of men.
They've got the same education as we have.
Do you think that's why, or do you think it's more a physical thing?
I don't think so. I mean, orgasm and ejaculation can happen in all sorts of ways. That's just the one we've been trained is the way.
Sure.
And we're also taught that, if you get any education when you're younger in school, and I know things are improving slowly in pockets, but there's still a lot of really, really poor education. Where we see the sexual organs, supposedly, or the reproductive organs, they wouldn't call them sexual probably, maybe they do now. Everything on the male is present, but for females, the anatomy is all internal and there's no mention of clitoris. And therefore, they're misinforming people because what they're implying is that the vagina is the female sex organ. And it isn't. The clitoris is the female sex organ. So if we even got that information at an age when it was useful, we might even think about other ways for pleasure that would bring up the tapas more easily. But if you're thinking, okay, penis must go in vagina and they're the two sex organs and that's where they meet, it makes more sense as to why we go there.
You're so right. And that is a lot of the education. Well, definitely the education we had, and I'm pretty sure it's still happening now. What kind of sexual connection might people actually be craving at different stages in life? Soothing, playful, that kind of thing?
I think that's very subjective. And I think there are people of all ages craving different things in their sexual connectivity. And some people who don't want connection, they want the act. And they don't want this connected piece. And we have to allow that those people have happy lives and do what they do. The problem is when they match with people who want the connection, and then there's a difficulty there. But the connective piece can come in all sorts of ways. It might be an emotional connection that may be better happening prior to the sexual encounter. It may be how they connect with communication, with eye contact, with breath and with touch during sex. And then it could be cuddly, or it could be passionate, it could be spanking, it could be tying up, it could be different positions, all sorts of things. It could be just masturbation, could be watching each other. all of those can connect people if that's what connects them. But the difficulty is being able to talk about the connection piece. It's connected to pleasure, and we really struggle to talk about pleasure. We're getting a bit better at talking about function. We're getting a bit better talking about, ooh, try this and do that. But actually sitting down and going, what do you enjoy? What makes you horny? What turns you on? Or what builds an orgasm for you? That's a really difficult conversation for a lot of people to have, even with their partners. Because pleasure is the last bastion, I think.
Yeah. Do you think one of the joys of, being sexually active and intimacy later in life is, first of all, experience? You kind of know yourself a bit more, and you tend to know what turns you on, and you definitely know what doesn't turn you on. Is that one of the huge benefits, obviously?
For those who know, I run a very busy private practice, and I work with all ages, and I wouldn't see a difference in age around that when it comes to women. And actually more and more men are coming to me going, I don't know what I like, and I feel I have to perform and I have to provide a particular way of being sexually, and it's very pressurizing, and I don't feel valued, and I don't feel loved, and I don't feel attractive, and I'm just expected to perform. And I welcome that. I welcome men beginning to touch in more on their feelings and their needs, and it allows us to have the conversations around that soften things a little bit. But there are a lot of people of all genders in all kinds of relationships who don't know that about themselves in later life. So put that aside for a minute. For those who do, yes, it's an absolute bonus. It really helps to be able to know your body, and it would be where I would want to start with most people.
And for those who don't know, what advice if they're listening, what advice would you give them, before therapy or before seeing a sexologist or whatever? What advice would you give them?
Educate yourself. Get yourself some really good information. Emily Nagoski's book is fantastic. Her book, Come As You Are, is really, really educational. It's correct information. It's sex positive. That's a great book we now have. It's not that old. Get yourself a really good book. Watch some really reliable shows, or listen to really good podcasts, and get yourself some good information. Then you need to masturbate, which is, so I go educate, masturbate, lubricate, communicate.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I love it. So I just want to say it all because it sounds good when I say it all together.
It does, yeah.
Slow it down. It's easy for me to say, right? But masturbation, if you've never done it, and our stats are very scarce from around the world, but kind of what we know is about 40% of women masturbate. So that's a lot of women who don't, and that's all ages. So, it's easy to say, oh, go and masturbate, but actually a lot of women in particular, or vulva owners, really struggle with that. They struggle because they have no relationship with their vulvas, because they feel they're dirty, or they're shameful, or they're disgusting, or they're ugly. So I don't say just go and masturbate lightly. That's the whole thing for a lot of people. I teach it as an attitude, and I call it self-love, because it's an attitude to your body. It may involve genital touch as you're starting out, but it mightn't. It might involve putting a really beautiful moisturizer on after a shower and just slowing down and noticing the parts of your body that you can appreciate. You don't have to love everything about your body. I'm not American. I'm not going, we're all amazing. That doesn't work for us. The reality is that we might just be able to find, I worked with somebody once, and the only thing when she began her journey that she could find that she liked about her body was the colour of the nail varnish she chose to put on. But she started there because it's a muscle, it's a habit. And the more you look for things that you can appreciate, the more you'll find them. It mightn't be what they look like aesthetically. It might be, oh, I've got great legs. They bring me everywhere. I can walk. It might be, and particularly for vulvas, as you begin your journey into sexual pleasure, it may be for heterosexual women more about what pleasure their vulva can bring them, clitoris and other parts, rather than aesthetically how much they like them. They don't have to love how they look. They're straight women. They're not going to have to play with them, but they can appreciate what they do for them. So slowing it down, taking your time, giving yourself some love, some appreciation, some acceptance, some breath, and then lubrication is vitally important for us all, and it doesn't matter what age you are. It's a really important thing to have. Young women who are using birth control may not lubricate naturally, and don't know that and they're not told that, which they should be. So they may be experiencing discomfort that can even bring on, more severe cases, including vaginismus, if they start to have painful sex.
Yeah.
It remains painful because they just don't know. But as we get older and our hormones change again and we're into menopause and getting older, lubrication is vitally important, as is topical estrogen. It's a whole other conversation around HRT, which you need to get working for you, because no amount of lube is going to fix you up properly if you need topical estrogen. That's lubrication. I like organic lubes, would be my favourite. I wouldn't use other kinds. I wouldn't be going near anything that cools or heats or numbs.
Or fizzes or tastes or...
They're full of chemicals, and this is the most sensitive, porous part of your body, so I think you have to be careful.
How do you feel about, sorry to jump in there, how do you feel, take a drink. How do you feel about coconut oil?
I'm a fan.
Okay.
Organic coconut oil is a lovely thing. Its pH balance is very similar to that of a healthy vagina, so it's fine. It is an oil, so it might mark your sheets, so just put a towel underneath you. It's not safe with the condoms. No oil is. So if you need to be careful with that. But otherwise, it's lovely for masturbation. If you really need a lube for penetrative play, it's not thick enough. It's a very thin coating. It'll work for some people who will naturally lubricate once they get going. But for women who are post-menopause, or certainly for any anal play where there's no natural lubrication, you're probably better off getting an oil-based proper lubricant that's thicker. And I love nut-based or oil-based lube as opposed to a petroleum-based oil.
Gotcha. So that's what you should be on the lookout for. Can I ask you, what tends to shift after 35? Physically, emotionally, for a lot of people, maybe people, especially women who are maybe going into perimenopause.
Every symptom that perimenopause brings to a woman is going to affect her sexuality, even if it's not directly connected. So if you start getting terrible headaches, if you're not sleeping well, if you start peeing in your pants, if you start putting on weight, or have aches and pains, mood swings, hot flushes, you're sweaty, none of those things are sexy.
They're not sexy.
Women don't feel like, oh yeah, great, I've just peed in my pants, let's have some spontaneous play. That is tricky. And again, because we're not taught about it, it feels shameful and women feel isolated about it and like they're the only ones. But actually, most women probably are having an experience of some kind or another that is similar. So the question isn't, oh, let's all go and, sort out our fannies really quickly and have really, never pee in our pants. That's great, do that. But what you do in the meantime, how can you find your way to being intimate in a way that feels good for yourself whilst you're not perfect? And that's the person I am. I am 55 on Friday, and I am not a person who does a huge amount of this stuff for myself. I have fantastic sex. I mean, geez, I hope it would be a sad case if I didn't. I've been doing this for a long time, and really great orgasms, and I'm a bit flabby. I don't work out. I should, and I plan to, I know from my other health, but I'm just saying, from a sexual perspective, I'm not that champion of doing all these amazing things, and I have a great time because I accept myself as I am, and I allow myself to be just as I am in the moment and focus on my pleasure, not on how my tummy is hanging down when I'm on all fours, which is hanging lower, my tummy or my boobs, I don't know. That kind of thing. I don't allow it in, because it gets in the way of me experiencing what my body is able to do for me.
That's the key.
That's the key.
Isn't it really? What about men over 35? Do they go through a downturn as well with hormones, testosterone? And
Yeah. And that's different again for a lot of men. But yeah, I mean, you start losing your testosterone very gradually from your mid-20s for males, and it gets more prominent then around your 40s. And so men can often then, or penis owners can often start to have problems with erections. Now, because of this message I was talking about earlier, for men, that they have to provide the erection so that it can go into a vagina, so that it can create great sex for everybody, which is a myth and a fallacy, they feel a huge amount of pressure to produce these erections. Sometimes they're not giving themselves the right stimulation or enough stimulation to match their lowered blood flow. Some people come to me and they still expect to be having hands-free sex. In their 40s, 50s, that's not going to happen anymore. You need a lot of stimulation. your porn use, the amount of porn use might be an issue, but it isn't for everyone, and it's way overblamed in regards to sexual functioning. But being able to talk about it and being able to listen to your partner, if they tell you, you having an erection and us having penetrative sex isn't the most important thing to me, men need to really hear that, and they often don't because they're so worried. And they lose their erection or they can't get it, and everything's over. There's nothing's going to happen after that because they have to go off and berate themselves in private and really beat the hell out of themselves. When actually there's a lot they could do that would be intimate and connected and loving and accepting. And then often, ironically, erections work better. But if they're all about, I must provide this, I didn't, therefore I have to go into shame, it kind of wrecks the sex life that could be there. And a lot of their female partners actually would be really happy with another kind of sexual play.
Can we talk about something that I feel is very common, that I've heard a lot, and that is women and men of a certain age, the desire tends to dwindle, especially if they've been in a long-term relationship, or their libido's on the floor for whatever reason, perimenopause, menopause, post, whatever. What would your advice be to them? But they want to be a sexual being, but they just can't find it. Where do they start?
Good news is they will find it. If they really want to, people are incredibly resourceful. People who love sex and they've lost their mojo for a while will get it back because they really want to. That's the key, and you will find your way. But again, it's about trusting yourself in that. Just because you don't have it now, again, it's okay to rest sometimes. And I think if you begin with permission to rest and not be this amazingly sexual animal 24/7, your nervous system relaxes, your hormones balance more naturally, you have space to play, you have space to experiment that might be with new things that you've never done before, that might be bringing in a whole new menu for you. But if we try to hang on to something that worked, a few months ago and now I've lost it, or even that, it's going to be much trickier. The people who find it more difficult are the ones who are on the fence about getting back to it, or who's, the reason the libido goes is really important. If it's hormones, you can get a lot of help with HRT. It's not the full answer, but it's a help. If it's a relationship issue, hormones aren't going to make you fancy your partner if he's not being good to you or she's not being good to you. That's a different thing. So it does matter.
The why matters.
The why really does matter, because it's another thing I get women coming to me quite a lot with. They come and they say, I don't want sex anymore. There's something wrong with me. And I'm like, well, did you enjoy sex? No. I'm like, well, then you're an intelligent person. Why would you crave something you don't enjoy? And we start there. So there are lots of reasons for libido to go.
Can we talk about menopause for a second?
Sure.
Let's do it. So what happens physically to women and their sexual state when they're going through menopause? Again,
it's a very individual. Some women...
It's different for everyone.
Some women fly through it.
Okay.
But for perimenopause, you can have... So it's a roller coaster, right? In every way. And for some women, they might be really horny one week and on the floor the next, and they do a bit of that. Maybe way longer than a week. It could be months. It could be longer than that they have these ups and downs.
Okay.
But some women report getting really horny during perimenopause, and that's the rush of hormones that we can't control. And I'd say go with it when that happens. But so lowered libido. And then, as I said, all the generalized symptoms will impact your libido as well. Your ability, so I split it into three things. I split it into desire, arousal, and ability to orgasm. They can all be affected by menopause and perimenopause. You might be affected in all three or two of them or one of them, and at different times. So it's really hard to say this is going to happen to you. But you might find your desire is low, but once you decide to be intimate with someone and you know that the touch and the play you're going to have is actually good, because that's the other thing, right? There's no point in having sexual play if the touch you're getting isn't doing it for you. There's nothing wrong with you. The touch needs help. It doesn't have to be anyone's fault. There's just some upskilling needed there. So arousal can be pretty good once you decide that you're going to be sexual, even if you didn't have much desire before that. But sometimes people have the desire and then they get to bed and they can't get turned on.
Yeah.
And that can be a hormonal thing as well. And then Bringing yourself to orgasm, that's a whole other part of it because our bodies change. So externally, the external part of the clitoris can shrink and it can lose plumpness in the area, your labia and around the clitoris can lose and get very sensitive. So again, a little bit of topical estrogen cream externally can really, really help with that. But for women in menopause, that can be an issue where the touch that they used to have that worked for them to turn them on and maybe even bring them to orgasm now feels way too much, too strong. And it is because they're much more sensitive. So again, I was saying this the other day, the way to approach the clitoris, I think, is to approach it like it's a nervous little pony, not like it's, running towards you wanting to stick its head in a feed bucket, to use a horse analogy. And I don't know why, but that's what I'm using.
I see it.
Approach it slowly.
Sense, yeah.
And for older women as well, to help with that, blood flow is less. We have an internal clitoris, which is made of erectile tissue. We get erections the same as men. It takes time. We don't give ourselves enough time and then we judge ourselves. But, average time to get a full erection for women is about 20 minutes. And that's including all the 20-year-olds and the 80-year-olds. So as we get older, it can take a bit longer. So massaging the vulva, massaging that area without going to the clitoris is going to be a really good friend to you.
We've mentioned this gaps in sexual knowledge, and I wanted to ask you about upskilling. If, you don't have the knowledge and you want to upskill, what resources are there? Where do you start with upskilling and finding out this information, or finding out, is it a physical problem? Is it a hormonal thing? Is it desire? Like, how do we do that?
And they're often all together. It's physical, it's hormonal, and that affects desire. So they often, if somebody comes to me, I want to know about their hormone situation, I want to know about their digestion, I want to know about their pelvic floor, and I want to know about all sorts of things that surround the sexual act.
Digestion.
Yeah, it's really, we're learning more and more, aren't we, about how important the gut is.
Yeah.
And it's right next to our sexual organs and so they're all connected. If you have pelvic floor issues, if you have constipation, if you have tummy issues, they're going to massively affect your ability to relax and to enjoy yourself sexually. So they're all important to be checked on, and they can all be helped, of course, if you know that you might need to go to a few different people. Oh, it's hard. This isn't easy stuff.
There's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do. I forgot to mention the very obvious thing as well as we age. For sexually is the lack of lubrication. I think I mentioned it otherwise, but
yeah,
it can really get very, very bad, and women don't know that and they put up with it. But the slightest discomfort or pain that you didn't have before should be checked and is likely to be a need for estrogen and very good lube. Very good lube.
You've said that a lot.
Yes, I can't stress it enough.
I get it. By
the way, it's really useful to have lube as well, and the coconut oil is good for this, for playing with penises. Females, people without penises, often touch penises too gently and softly because they're thinking of their own genitals and how that would be way too much for them. And vice versa, penis owners can often go to the clitoris way too vigorously because they're imagining what it would be like for them. So again, because we don't have education, we love how we want to be loved, we touch how we want to be touched quite often. So it's really important to slow that down. So a bit of lube on the old penis can allow you to have a lot more moves and a lot more power in how you touch. And again, check with your person that that's what they enjoy. But quite often that can really help with erections as well.
Okay, so before we get to the lube stage and we're in the bedroom and all that kind of stuff, if I'm a person, going through menopause, let's say, and my libido's on the floor, but I want to get back into it, what stages or what steps would you give that person?
I would say start alone.
Okay.
Take the pressure off. Treat yourself like a precious being and care for yourself and
be kind to yourself.
That's the number one thing, and a really hard thing. You're not a machine. You're not going to just, by the way, I believe that our clitorises and our vulvas are incredibly emotional. I believe penises are as well. If you're talking nastily to them, if you have a bad opinion of them, and then you just expect them to behave perfectly for you, you're not going to get your results. So the kinder you are, to your body, all parts of your body, the better. You've nerve endings all over your body. If it feels too much to start genitally, start with your neck, start with your arms, start with your inner thighs, work your way towards that. Wake yourself up. Remember, sex is experienced through the senses. So you can begin your journey with your senses and be gentle. You don't have to rush straight to your clitoris and try and bang one out when you're totally not in the mood and you're not sure what you're doing.
I love that you said bang one out. Okay.
We've got so focused on orgasms being the make of it all. And I work with lots of women who can orgasm and they're still not happy with their sex lives because they need more than that. There's more to it.
Do you think a huge problem is individuals being present? We find it very difficult to be present.
Yeah.
I mean, we find it difficult to be present in any situation, let alone the bedroom. So maybe if we can work on that aspect of our life, we'll get better at being present in the bedroom.
Yeah, and being present in the bedroom is not something, there's very few, if you have all the time in the world to go off and train in Tantra and that's your job and that's what you do, great, you're going to learn how to be present all the time and you can have these amazing, but just like the Dalai Lama says, oh, you should do this, fine, but I don't have somebody cooking all my meals and driving me around and doing all the cleaning and blah, blah. The reality is you are going to get distracted. You are going to lose your concentration. Don't beat yourself up, but don't feed that train of thought. Oh, geez, I forgot to make that phone call now. Don't then have the conversation in your head. Go, okay, parking it. What's happening in my body right now? So you don't panic that you get drawn away with other thoughts. You just learn how to come back to it using your breath and the sensations in your body. And it's a dance that you're constantly doing throughout sexual play.
It's nice to hear that we can keep getting better at it.
Of course, yeah. And that you don't have to be perfect or you don't have to reach a certain stage before you can expect to have great sex. Everyone gets distracted sometimes. And sometimes you're distracted to the point where you may as well just stop now because, it's taken over. Forgive yourself. It's okay. And if you're having a sex life that you can talk about with your person and you can have that permission for each other, that's not an issue because you trust that your person wants to be with you, you want to be with them. This isn't about that. This is just something that's cropped up. It's difficult. You'll get back to it. So that's why communication, which was the fourth of those things I mentioned, is so important because through that we learn that not being in the mood or a sexual act not working out isn't a sign or of threat to the relationship necessarily. Of course it can be, but it isn't always.
Emily, thank you so much for your expertise, for your knowledge, and now we need to all go out and buy some lube.
And maybe a nice toy.
And maybe a nice toy. Let's do that. Thank you. Is there anything else? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay. That's a good question. Okay. I just have one more question.
Lovely. I'm yours.
So for people dealing with illness, disability or pain, how can sex adapt rather than just disappear?
I mean, this is something that you might need to get help with, but not always. Sometimes it's just thinking outside the box, no pun intended, but sometimes it is just allowing yourself permission to do things differently. I have beautiful examples of that. I remember a couple and she was in hospice and they'd had a really beautiful connected sex life. She was dying and they spoke about making love up to the last of her days, but they weren't doing sexual acts. They changed it to match what they were both able for, and it became about how they held each other's hands and how he massaged her hands and a beautiful cream into her hands, and she held his hand back and they kissed each other's hands and they looked into each other's eyes, and that was their lovemaking, and that's what they called it. I know of another, one of the people who trained me had a private practice, and he was sent this couple in their 70s, and the man had developed a bad back problem, and they'd been sent by the doctors to help them get over it. They should be done with sex now. Sure, they've done the procedure on his back, and isn't he lucky? And so you help them get to terms with that. And in one session, he spoke to them And they'd only ever done it in one position with him on top. They'd never learned anything differently. They didn't know about it. They'd never looked at anything. So they thought because he couldn't support himself in that position anymore that they had to stop having sex. So with a bit of help, how to use cushions, how to use supports, how to change position, they went home and they rang him that evening and said, "We've had sex, yay, and we're back." So quite often it isn't as complicated as we think when it comes to an injury or pain. It can be a case of just thinking about it and what
Adapting.
can we do. Now with medication or illness, that can be a very different
thing.
thing and much more complex. And we have to be kind, always kind to ourselves. And so I'm not going to throw out, some things about that, because usually people who are living with chronic pain or have to take medication that really floors them, it doesn't land well, and it's not what they need to hear. But there are things that can be done depending on what the issue is. Of course, it might be that you have to rewrite your idea of what sex is. But sure, we're all doing that, hopefully, as we age anyway.